All right, we're finally set up here. We have to do a reboot with the new Macs and the old projector for some reason. So anyway, but it's up now, and Mike is gonna regale us with tales.
Yes.
So he's here
Okay.
from Baltimore.
All right, I'm gonna
Thank you.
I'm gonna drive and talk at the same time while I bring this presentation up. So, hello everybody. My name's Mike Zabelski. I'm with Other Inbox here, and this is I could talk about. I think I could probably talk for 2 hours on this subject, but I'm going to do it in 30 minutes. So I'm planning to go fast to keep the energy level up. But then we'll do questions at the end, or actually, it's fine if we can talk. We do questions at any time you want. But I'm gonna like err on the side of going too fast, and then you guys can slow me down
Rein you in.
if I say something that's particularly intriguing. Almost done here. This is a reprise of something I talked about at the Lone Star Ruby conference. How many people saw that talk? All right, good. Well, I promise there's all new material, new wisdom, new insights. I've grown as a person since then. So.
Most of them were probably in my talk.
That's right, exactly.
We were head to head.
That's right. Yeah, actually, unfortunately for that talk, I had to go head to head against Mike, so I felt very bad about that. Okay. All right. I don't know why everything's taking so long while this critical juncture. Okay.
Maybe you need to upgrade your laptop. Switch to Windows.
All right. So my talk is about writing Ruby and especially Rails code in a startup environment. And I wanted to start off by sort of highlighting my favorite thing that I've learned in the past 2 years of really being immersed in the startups. How many people have read either one of these books or recognize it? Okay. So this is like the canonical or the Gang of Four book that everyone talks about that really gets into the design of the kinds of software that as a Rails developer we're writing. This is Russ Olson's book, which is kind of like a distilled version of this that's specifically aimed at Ruby developers, which is maybe a little bit more accessible and relevant, approachable. So he highlights these 5 design principles for designing Ruby code. And if you sort of zone out for the rest of the talk, this is the most important thing, which is, to me, I underestimated the importance of design at the beginning of building Other Inbox. The joy of Ruby and of Rails is that you could really be a cowboy or a cowgirl. You could go out there and build something right away that basically works. And that's so joyful and exciting. It's really easy to overlook this stuff because this actually takes work. This takes more work than maybe we feel like doing. Like this involves you setting up a folder structure and creating modules for shared code and stuff that's not as exciting as releasing a user-facing feature. So I just want to put the most important thing right at the beginning of the talk, which is learn about design. One of the books I was given away was a design book. I try to get my hands on as much design information as I possibly can. It's a big deficit in my education. So I'm Mike, that's my Twitter name. This is what I learned while building Other Inbox. So what is unique about this startup environment? It's really I distilled it down to 2 things. You're trying to solve an unknown problem, and you don't even know what it actually is that you're building, and you never have enough time and resources because at this stage the thing you're making is it's an idea in someone's head, and it could be totally wrong or flawed. Also, you're besides not wanting to run out of time, and money, you also are moving very quickly because every time you make a little change and you show the code to someone, you're getting feedback, especially if you're showing it to people that you're actually trying to get to pay money for it. And so this is a quote that I'm going to refer to this guy a lot, Eric Ries. He has this really excellent blog. Was the CTO of a startup called InView. So he's an engineer who became a CTO, but he writes exactly like the way that programmers think, and it's a lot of relevant stuff there. So when I wrote this talk, I just thought, well, if I could go back in time 2 years ago and give myself advice, what would I say to myself to thrive under these conditions? Well, I've already touched on one thing I would say, which is that you should spend more time in designing. And I don't mean like creating a lot of formal documents and specifications. I just mean like whiteboarding things, or doing a little research. How have other people solved this problem? And I would also tell myself, don't make a bunch of these mistakes that you're going to make and have to live with, or that you'll have to spend time correcting. So the first half of my talk, I want to touch on what I've learned about these design principles. I definitely don't feel like I'm an expert on this. I mean, I'm really only hazarding to talk about it because what I have learned so far has been so helpful to me. Okay, so design for change just means you separate the code that for general functionality that's not likely to change. I mean, once you have a particular way of doing things that it's not even that specific to your application, that's probably not going to change that much. But the stuff that is really specific to the problem that you're solving, that's not the plumbing code, that's the business logic, you want to separate that out because that's the kind of stuff that is going to change. It also means that when you make a design decision, if it's something that you think you might want to be able to change later, like it could even be like the name of a file, or I want to use SimpleDB for this one thing, and then later down the road you might want to use a completely different storage system. Put that into its own module, so you only have to make that change one place. And it makes you design a real clean API within your code. So here's an example from our code. The first time we started using SQS for like one thing in our app, I just made this constant that this is a gem that helps you set up an interface. I mean, the details of it aren't really that important. It's just that I needed to get a handle on like this one reference to the simple queue service, right? And so then anytime we wanted to get a particular queue, we just ran like a little piece of code like this, and we sort of established this convention pretty early on. It's like, all right, we want to namespace our queues so that if you're doing something on staging server, you don't clobber what someone else is doing in production. And this worked fine, but then we really liked SQS and we started using it like all over the place. And so after a while, these things changed. Like we came up with a different way that we wanted to namespace the queues. And so, what did I have to do? I had to do kind of a big, I don't even know if I'm the one that did it, but some unfortunate person had to go through the code and do a big global find and replace. And it probably, you couldn't even really do a find and replace because, not everyone used this variable. And it was just, actually it was sort of fine. This is kind of a simple example, but you can imagine more complex things where this one decision to use a constant and to use SQS, now it's like coupled to your code all over the place. It's a lot of extra work. So then we came up with, this is well, basically what we did is we isolated those decisions inside of a module called the queue fetcher. And now whenever you want to use a queue, all you need to know is this one method call here. You just give it the name, like this is your personally in your code how you're going to refer to that code. The queue fetcher does the rest. And then you can manipulate the queue and do whatever you want. And it's actually super simple. Or like this is the first iteration of it. This is the convention where we want to put the queue environment up front, and we want to put the queue name at the end, and then we do a little something different here with the queue environment, which I can talk about later if you're interested. But what I really wanted to point out is we've even isolated another decision here, because if you are monkeying around the queue fetcher class, you don't really need to know exactly how application configuration is stored. There's just this object that you ask for a variable, and you get it back. I actually have more to say about that one later. I actually don't like the fact that we're still, like when I went back to look at this, I thought actually that's not all that much better than the original problem. The pattern I'm favoring now is like if I make something like this, I want this to be something that I can configure at runtime, like in a Rails app. I want to be able to set that with production.rb if I want. Or it's like something where a queue fetcher, by default, maybe it would try and find an SQS reference, but you could override it and equip it with something else. Because then if you want to test this class, now you got to make sure you've defined this constant there. That's kind of annoying. Or like, well, you know, what if, yeah, this is something other people can mess around with. I just don't like it. I could show you another example of a better way to design that if you want. All right, another thing that should be designed for change and isolated in its own module is business logic. And this is my favorite thing that we've done. This is actually Aaron wrote this. In other inbox, there's all this code that runs once only. Whenever a message gets delivered, we have to do all this stuff to make sure that the entire graph of objects that connects a user to a message get created and maintained. Counters get incremented, but it only applies for that one time. So one of the ways we reduced the complexity of that stuff and made it easier to change, because it changes all the time, as we get more users, we get some very obscure corner cases where somebody's getting a Craigslist message sent from Japan and it has special characters in the subject. It was one header that no other email message ever had. Now, whenever that stuff happens, it's a lot easier to fix it because you probably know that, oh, this only happens the first time a message gets delivered. This is this one method. So we created this class envelope that's just like it represents a message in transit through our system. So it's a wrapper for the message, and the very last thing the envelope does is actually create a message object, inserts it into the database. So then all that stuff that we had crammed into all of our models that only apply to this one case is isolated. Okay, another design principle: program to interfaces, not implementations. So this just means using general types, or of course, as a Rubyist, we don't really have to use types at all if we can help.